Namaskar. Today we'll study intercellular signaling. So when there is communication between two cells, that means a signal is transmitted from one cell to the other cell. Say one cell is the sending cell and the other cell may say the receiving cell. So a sending cell sends one signal and the receiving cell receives the signal, then it is called intercellular signaling. And what is that signal? That signal may be a neurotransmitter, maybe a hormone, or maybe a chemical mediator. So that signal is transmitted between two cells. One is the receiver and the other is the sender. This is called intercellular signaling. And there can be four types of intercellular signaling. One is contact dependent signaling, two is paracrine signaling, three is synaptic signaling, and four is endocrine signaling. So let us discuss one by one. Contact dependent signaling. That means the two cells are in direct contact with each other. Then we call it as contact dependent signaling. So let us take an example of the antigen presenting cell and the T lymphocyte. So the signaling here occurs because of direct contact between the antigen presenting cell and the T lymphocyte. And what is this antigen presenting cell? So when there is presence of one antigen or an infection, that antigen is presented through this antigen presenting cell in the form of major histocompatibility complex. So antigen, it is engulfed and then it is processed and expressed in the form of major histocompatibility complex. So if it is major histocompatibility complex 1, then CD8 receptors in the T lymphocytes they recognize, and if it is major histocompatibility complex 2, then CD4 receptors in T lymphocytes they recognize. So there will be an interaction between MHC2 CD4 or MHC1 CD8. CD8 is attached to the cytotoxic T lymphocytes, and this CD4 is linked to your T helper cells. And then there will be autocrine action, release of interleukin 2 from these T lymphocytes. Then they will be proliferated to T helper node cells and so on, which are involved in our immune reactions. So here what we are discussing, contact dependent signaling. Contact dependent, why we call? Because the two cells are in close proximity with each other and they are in contact with each other through one cell is showing the signal and the other cell is having the receptor, and both are interacting. So it is called contact dependent signaling. And the best example is our immune responses during development and during immune reactions. All these things happen. So this is an example: antigen presenting cell presenting MHC2, T lymphocyte with CD4 receptors, they interact. Then we will discuss the second one, paracrine signaling. In paracrine signaling, there is release of local mediators into the extracellular space. So the cell, or say signaling cell, will release some local mediators into the extracellular space, and in the extracellular from the extracellular space, these local mediators will act on their specific receptors or targets on the neighboring cells or target cells. For example, mast cell. Mast cell is a specialized basophil cell which releases histamine, and in GIT, histamine acts on the parietal cells of GIT, the oxyntic cells in the stomach, to secrete acid. So acid secretion will be the result. So mast cell is the signaling cell, and chemical mediator is the histamine, and then histamine say acts on the oxyntic cells, and there will be there will be in the oxyntic cells there is H2 receptor, say H2 receptor. So histamine will act on H2 receptor, and there will be release of acid, or there will be secretion of acid. So this type of signaling is called paracrine signaling, involvement of local mediators. Sometimes what happens, these local mediators, they act again on the same cell from which they are released, that is called autocrine signaling. But here we are discussing intercellular signaling, so we are not including autocrine signaling, because the same cell from which they are released, they act on the same cell. So this can be one example of autocrine signaling. So T lymphocytes, after interaction with the antigen presenting cells, they will release interleukin 2, and the same interleukin 2 will again act on T lymphocytes. So there will be proliferation of T lymphocytes to form T helper NOT cells, and then again T helper NOT cells will release interleukin 4, which will again act on them for further proliferation into T helper 2 cells. So this type of action is autocrine action. This is one type of signaling, but this is not intercellular signaling. One cell only is involved. So paracrine signaling. Then we will discuss the third one, synaptic signaling. Synaptic signaling is nothing but one type of paracrine signaling only, but here the synapse is involved. That means one nerve ending is involved, neuron is involved. So this is nerve terminal or nerve ending, and from this the neurotransmitters are released, and these neurotransmitters can act on the postsynaptic receptors. So if this is the synapse, the gap between the nerve ending and the cells. So suppose it is cardiac muscle. So in the cardiac muscle, in the postsynaptic, there will be presence of, say, muscarinic 2 receptors. So if this is a cholinergic neuron, we are discussing one example. So if it is a cholinergic neuron, it will release acetylcholine, and this acetylcholine will act on the M2 receptors, and there will be a result in decrease in heart rate, that is bradycardia. So in this way it happens. So this type of signaling, in which the neurotransmitter is released from the nerve ending, and those neurotransmitters will act on the postsynaptic receptors, that is called synaptic signaling. And finally, the fourth one is the endocrine signaling. In endocrine signaling, the endocrine cells from glands will release the hormone, which will directly enter into the blood circulation. Through blood circulation, it will, so this is blood circulation. Through blood circulation, it will reach its target site, where it will bind, the hormone will bind to the specific receptor present on the target cell and will function. So hormones released into the blood circulation, and through blood circulation it will reach the target site where it will act. So this type of signaling is called endocrine signaling. For example, beta cells of islet of Langerhans of pancreas secrete insulin, and that insulin enters the blood circulation, and through blood circulation it will go to different parts of the body, different cells, where it will increase the glucose uptake. So so insulin will bind to, suppose insulin is there, so insulin will bind to the insulin receptor on the target cell, and it will increase the synthesis and recruitment of, say, glucose transporter, so that the glucose will enter inside, and so that the glucose uptake will occur. So this is glucose, this is insulin, say. Insulin binds to the insulin receptor, and that will lead to the synthesis and recruitment of glucose transporter, and glucose enters into the body. So blood sugar decreases. So this type of signaling through hormone is called endocrine signaling. So these are the four ways by which intercellular signaling occurs. Thank you.